When I think back to that day, it's strange because, today it's 9/11, and it's ironic because today's weather feels so very much like it did on that very day. I'll never forget it. It was a beautiful Tuesday. I actually had taken the day off of work because I was going to meet with a banking person. I was in the middle of buying a house, and I remember leaving my house, and I was driving my car down Duke Street, and all of a sudden I hit all this traffic, and I thought to myself, what is going on? What is that about? I remember seeing a lady in the car next to me. I looked over, and she was just crying, and I saw her shaking her head. I thought she didn't have a cell phone. I didn't know if she was talking to somebody. I rolled my window down, and I looked over, and I said, "Ma'am, is everything all right? You look upset." And she says, "Oh, it's terrible. Isn't it just terrible?" I said, "What do you mean, what's terrible?" She said, "The planes, they're attacking us." And I said, "What?" Just turn on the radio. So I turned on the radio, and all I remember when I turned on the radio was hearing people say, "Oh my God, I've never seen anything like this. We don't know how many more planes." And I still at that point did not understand what was going on. It was the longer I listened to the broadcast, the clearer it unfortunately became. It was shocking. What's interesting is while I was sitting in traffic, I remember seeing like smoke on the horizon. See, I'm only about 5 minutes away from the Pentagon. I thought, oh my gosh, it looks like a big fire. Maybe there's been a gas line break or something. I had no idea at that time that the Pentagon had been hit. And I remember turning on the TV and the first thing actually I saw was the Pentagon. I thought, oh my God, the Pentagon's been hit. And then they switched to New York, and I saw one of the towers. I said, what is going on? I was still very much in a state of confusion. At that point, we were waiting for the president to address the country. It was a very tense situation. I think one of the things that stands out in my mind also of that day was, seeing the horror unfold on live TV. I remember seeing people like reaching out the windows of the high rises of the Twin Towers, just screaming. And I remember seeing this live and hearing reports that people were jumping. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I remember the instant sense of unification, because it seemed like people everywhere were gathering. I remember people calling me and said, "You want to come over to my house? We can watch this together." I remember neighbors going to each other's homes during that time and sitting together. As I recall, we didn't really know where these attacks were coming from. And, I remember thinking, oh my God, are we going to nuclear war? It really seemed like that was not beyond the realm of possibility. It was absolutely devastating. I remember that first night lying in bed. And it was strange because I live near an airport, so I'm used to hearing airplanes, and it was silent. But what would pierce the silence would be like a fighter jet, because they had the nation under military patrol that night, because we didn't know if more attacks were coming. And I remember hearing the sharp piercing sound. If you've ever heard a fighter jet, you never forget it. And I just thought, my God, what has this come to? What is going to happen? Nobody still knew who was actually behind it. There were rumors and speculation, but nobody really knew. I remember, I was doing psychic work back then as well, almost 10 years ago. I was working then part-time as a psychic as I was building my business. And, people always say, oh, you psychics, you didn't save us, you should have done better work. Well, sometimes we just don't see it all. But what's really, really shocking and still haunting to me is that very week of 9/11, I had a lady come see me, and she said, well, what do you see around my friend Penny? She had a question. And I used my crystal ball, and actually this is the actual crystal ball that I used, and I looked into it, and I remember seeing destruction. I remember flames, black smoke. It was like darkness, and I remember seeing a lot of people scrambling and screaming, and it was death and destruction. And I told her, I said, I see your friend in grave danger. I said, there's like a fire around her. It's explosions, it's smoke, blackness. I could see the blackness of the smoke. And I remember her laughing at me, and she said, oh, Bob, please, come on, that's a little dramatic, isn't it? I mean, my friend works at the safest place of all. It's the Pentagon. Nothing like that could happen there. As tragic as it was, I also saw a lot of beauty. I saw a lot of people come together. And I remember hearing about in New York that a lot of Jewish women had got together, and they were escorting the Muslim women to go shopping, to say these people are our friends, not our enemies. 9/11 brought out in people, I think, some of the best behavior we've ever seen. I think if we could have one thing come out of it, if one thing good came out of 9/11, I'd say what that was we learned a little bit of compassion. When we were all in this state of terror and panic, we all had to pull together. The firefighters were our heroes. The military, the police, all of the armed services, the law enforcement, the public defenders. These were our heroes that day. And all the men and women, the people forget also about the everyday citizen who was in the street who helped. I know there were a lot of people that were at the Pentagon who were just civilians who had medical backgrounds rushing in to help. I think I'll never forget that afternoon. I got in my car and I drove over to the Pentagon, and I remember, seeing it for the first time. It was strange. It was literally like being in a movie, because you saw this building with this massive, you can't describe, it's hard to even fathom unless you actually, the pictures don't really capture it. But there was a giant, gaping, burned out hole in our Pentagon. It was shocking. I remember standing there. I pulled my car over. You could actually stop your car. There was literally no traffic on the road. And I got out and I looked. I didn't even have a camera with me in those days, and I didn't have a video cam then. And I remember staring at it and thinking how surreal, how devastating it was. You really couldn't get your mind around it. I mean, it was like you saw it, but you couldn't quite absorb the reality of what had occurred. It was that shocking. I actually, I did lose a friend in 9/11. There was a lady that I worked with named Norma, and she was on the plane that went down at the Pentagon. In the week following 9/11, a lot of people were being asked for donations for the Red Cross. I mean, we had such a devastation on a scale that this country, I don't think, really had ever prepared for. And I thought, I'm a psychic, I'm a medium. What can I do? I asked myself, what can I do? Well, that week, I put together a seance, and I invited people to my home, and I charged $50. I didn't force them, but I asked if people could, to make a donation of $50 for the Red Cross. And I had a nice turnout, about 15 people come. 9/11, it's something I'll never forget.